I just caught wind that Iowa State is projected to be a 3 seed in this year's March Madness tournament. What is going on here? What are we doing? I'm speechless. We got to break down why that is not the case today on Locked On Cyclones.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to you for being here every single day and making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Wherever you're watching or listening, be sure to subscribe so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. What are we talking about today? Men's basketball for the first little bit here, obviously, why I think that this team is deserving of a number 1 seed. Then in the second segment, we're going to break down who is the MVP of this team. It might not be who you think. And then finally, in the third segment, we are going to go over some football, okay? A little bit of a change of pace, some news, some happenings. That'll all be coming towards the end. Before we get that far, though, first things first, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. All right, let's dive into the basketball, shall we? 68 teams bracket-wise for this March Madness tournament. Iowa State, I expect, will be one of them. The question isn't, will they make it? It's, where will they be seeded? Now, everything is projections right now. We still, Iowa State still has games left to play, let alone everyone else. And some of those will be huge matchups, okay? It's not like 1 or 2 games either. Obviously, Iowa State has 7 left. But, I mean, like, looking ahead to this weekend, Alabama, Auburn, okay, that game is going to be huge, depending on how it goes as well. So there are a lot of moving parts to this, but that doesn't change what's about to happen in this segment, the knowledge I'm about to bestow upon you. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Is the ESPN predictions. Auburn, Alabama, Duke, and Tennessee are your 4 1 seeds. Okay, then your 2 seeds. Okay, because I was looking at this, I was like, oh, which region is Iowa State going to be the 2 seed in? That's genuinely what I was looking at this for and what's prompted this segment. You've got Houston, Purdue, Florida, and Texas A&M are your 4 2 seeds. So I was like, oh, geez, where's Iowa State 3 seed? I assume 3 seed. Then I pull up, obviously all these 3 seeds here. The bracket is like super hard to read. There it is. Okay. Michigan State, Iowa State, obviously, Arizona, and Texas Tech are your 4 3 seeds. Okay. And the Iowa State in the ESPN prediction is in the Midwest region. I think CBS has them in the South, and Fox maybe has them in the West, or the other way around. They're kind of all over in the regions. Okay. So we're not here to talk about potential matchups or potential whatever. We're still a ways out from this tournament. Okay. The reason we're here is because Iowa State is somehow being regarded as a 3 seed. I'm like genuinely not only in shock, but also kind of pressed. Like, what are we even doing here? It's not even fair. I don't think that's preposterous. Arizona, the 3 seed, obviously, as well. Texas Tech, and then Michigan State, I think is who was, right? Boom. They're kind of all over the place in here. I'm going to go with yes, because I do remember saying that. Yep. Okay. So Arizona and Texas Tech. Texas Tech, I think, is very much a 3 seed. They're wickedly good. Arizona got the short end of the Kansas State team that seems to be really, really solid. So I don't think that's something I hold against them. And Michigan State, well, I watched their game against UCLA, but that's really about it. I can't tell you too much. They're not in the Big 12. What we're talking about here, though, is not the 3 seeds, okay? Because obviously 3 seeds are going to be good. We're not talking about the 2 seeds. I don't even want to reread them, okay? I quite frankly don't care, because Iowa State should be at the 1 seed anyways. Okay, I don't even care what region, and we've talked about this. I've said I don't really care what seed. Okay, is there buys in this tournament outside of like being in that bubble, the what is it, the last 4 in, or that little 8 teams, whatever's going on there. Outside of that, is there an extra like an advantage? Do you get a buy for a high seed? No, you got to win the games in front of you. Okay, that's how I feel about this team, but it's disrespectful to put them at 3. Who would they take over at 1, obviously, is the first question that comes to mind. Auburn, Alabama, 2 really, really solid teams. Obviously, Auburn beats Iowa State. Be ridiculous to say that Auburn shouldn't be a 1 seed and Iowa State should. Not going to say that. Okay. Now, the Alabama one, interesting. We'll see how if Auburn wins by, let's say, 2 million to 6, there's probably a chance that Alabama's no longer being considered a 1 seed. However, I don't foresee that being the case. That would break all sorts of records. So realistically, it's likely that even if Alabama got blown out, they probably wouldn't drop very much. Okay, they're still a very solid team. The other 2 1 seeds, Duke and Tennessee. Duke, really good team as well, performing very well in metrics wise. Just really solid team. I'm 99% sure they beat Auburn. Let me double check that. Yes, they did beat Auburn. Yep, there it is. So that's also going to help their case. And then Tennessee. Okay, now Tennessee did lose to a Florida team by a lot, 30 points. No, something to note. You lose to a Vanderbilt. You lose to Auburn. You lose to Kentucky not only once, but twice. So if there's going to be a team that Iowa State's going to overtake, it's going to be Tennessee. Okay, I think that's fair. And that's not a shot at Tennessee. Not necessarily, I'm just saying, because obviously our Iowa State's record, you could take a look at that and then you'd be like, boom, boom, boom. Tennessee's better. Okay. We'll get to that in just a second. Now, I'm saying Auburn, Duke, Alabama, top tier talent, top tier teams. Okay. Tennessee right in that conversation. I'm just saying that if it's going to be one of the 4, Tennessee's probably the one to fall as it stands in this moment. Any one of them could start losing games by 50 night after night, and then all of a sudden they're not probably qualifying for a 1 seed. Kind of like how Iowa State slipped out of it. Now, how did Iowa State slip out of the 1 seed? It's a good question, because honestly, it kind of happened in the blink of an eye. That would be because of an injury. Most injuries are pretty acute. Okay. They aren't exactly chronically drawing this team down. Iowa State loses Momcilovic and then obviously wins that the Kansas game, loses to West Virginia, win, and then a 3-game losing streak there. So those 3 games, that 3-game losing streak was the end of the Momcilovic missing, and the Kansas was the beginning. Okay. So if you go in that spread, you're 1-1 through the first 2. Then you're 3-1. Okay. 3-1. Then you add 3. You're 3-4. The 3 losses. You add the 3 losses. You're 3-4. Not a great stretch of the road there. What about all the other games, though? Because that was kind of bumpy. I'm not going to lie. Logging in, sitting here, talking about this team was kind of tough. It wasn't fun. As fun as it's been all year. Now, what is the team's record outside of those 3-4 records, 7-game stretch that time of the year? Well, I don't know. I'm not going to count, but I believe it's 15-1 or 16-1. However many wins, 1 loss to Auburn on a tip-in. A lot of big wins. Obviously, the Iowa win, big 4 inside the state, but you beat at Texas Tech, who's a 3 seed. Okay. You dominate some of these teams. Even the Kansas game at home without Momcilovic kind of felt dominant. Okay. I'm not going to break down every game, but like Marquette, it was a big one as well. I think we were 4 at the time, 4-5 matchup. Huge. So why does this team deserve to be a 1 seed? Because they are stellar when they have all their dudes on the floor. I don't think it's that complicated. I'm not taking anything away from the top 4 teams right now. Just saying that Iowa State has 1 loss, and it was a wild loss. Wild loss. And that's essentially with the team they have out there right now. Now, will the 7-game stretch, in which I might I add, in that stretch, you lose to Arizona on a heave, and I don't care how many times people tell me it wasn't a heave. It was a heave. You lose to West Virginia, team that's going to qualify that as a Super Bowl every time, which isn't seen in the eyes of the committee that way, but it is. Kansas State, who's really solid. They are just surprisingly good. And then a Kansas on the road. So it's not like the losses we have here. Maybe the West Virginia is the weakest one, and Kansas State, I suppose, would be the next one, but they're still a really solid team right now. Coach Tang's got that team rolling. So might I add that the losses aren't even that bad. But those will certainly be looked at. But the question is, can we discount those? Because obviously with Milan on the floor, we're pretty good. We haven't really lost more than 1 time. That's not even the right sentence. We haven't lost more than one time. So the question now is, who's the MVP of this team at this moment in time? Season's not over. A lot of basketball left. At this moment in time, who is the MVP? I don't know. Stick around to find out. We'll cover it coming up right after this. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three. I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So we just got done talking about how Iowa State is a #1 seed caliber team with Milan Momcilovic on the floor. Okay. And I stand by that. I 1,000,000% mean it. That to me it's just so far from a lie that it's the truth. Okay. It's not even an opinion anymore. You're here with Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. With a statement like that, that's actually low-key kind of crazy. The question, who is the MVP or the most important Cyclone, I suppose, the MIC of this team? To say it would be anyone but Momcilovic feels like that's like I'm kind of being hypocritical. Now, let's break it down. I don't know. I mean, where am I going to land? I don't know. Stick around to find out. Curtis Jones, obviously being the kind of scoring guy for this team, is one that you look towards, right? Then you got Justin Jefferson in there, who is an absolute dog on the inside. His vision, his ability, it's levels. Okay, we've talked about it certainly at length. Okay, and obviously with UCF in the conversation, we had to talk about his 30 piece in there as well. So Jefferson, we know how we feel about that. Then you've got Tamin Lipsey, who is kind of the heart and soul of this team. You're not going to see what he does in the box score, but you're going to feel it. Okay, he's going to bring it to the team. They say bring Tamin making Tamin plays. Is there a Tamin plays counter in the box score? No. So, I mean, when you look at his, I've got the box score up to assist in my points here, but we've got to keep that into consideration as well. And then you're right. You want to talk about Momcilovic and his impact. You go from a 1-loss team to essentially a 4-loss team in significantly less games without Momcilovic. Something to think about potentially. And then Keyshawn Gilbert being the dog point guard that he is. So this team is absolutely riddled with talent, which is going to make this question very hard. And why I want to know what you think. Tell me who you think is the MVP or the MIC of this team down in the comments, because I think, honestly, if you picked any one of those guys and you had the right argument, I think you're right. Okay. Now, I will say, take this with a grain of salt. This is just my opinion. There's no actual real answer to this. It's just my thoughts. Momcilovic cannot win the MIC as it stands at this moment in time right now today, because we're talking about like NBA awards. You can't win the award if you haven't played a percentage of the games. Okay. To me, he hasn't been on the floor for those 7 games, which does show directly how important he is to this team. Yes. But if you're going to look at the year as a whole, if this team slips from a 1 to a 3 to a 4 or whatever seed, I wouldn't imagine we go down from a 4, but you understand the point I'm making here? That would be kind of a direct result of those 7 games. Imagine you win all those games. Iowa State's still probably 2 or 3 in the country, still probably looking at a 1 seed. So, those prove how important he is. They prove it. Like, it's like night and day. It's actually kind of crazy how stark the difference is, but I'm not going to put him in there just for that reason alone. Tell me if I'm wrong for that. I don't know. I feel like I'm right. My pick for most important Cyclone is probably Curtis Jones. Now, you could talk me off that rock, but Curtis Jones has just been a spark at times. Now, I'm 50-50 on Keyshawn Gilbert. I do think Keyshawn Gilbert is arguably less talented, but more impactful. It's kind of how do you want to face the argument? Because I do think Curtis Jones carried this team through a lot of wins in that period of time, right? With Kansas, UCF, Arizona State, and kept us close, with Arizona, and the other losses were pretty rough. And at that point, it was kind of a weird time in Iowa State basketball. So that's why I'm picking him in this one, because he showed up. Okay. I mean, you look at the Iowa State Kansas game and the box score for that. What did he have as a starter here? Curtis Jones had 25 in that one, leading scorer. Okay. Now, huge win at home. Big deal. Big deal. He wins. He doesn't effectively win you that game. I hate saying that, but huge deal in that game. The other side of it is Keyshawn Gilbert. And I will stick with Curtis Jones because that's what I said. But Keyshawn Gilbert, fun fact for you, leading the team in assists per game. Wild. Wild. Okay. So on top of his, and I just saw some people saying, oh, I heard a really good comparison calling Keyshawn Gilbert Kyrie in the UCF broadcast, I think is where it was. I was like, did we not just say that like 3 weeks ago when he was like, he's like, jelly. Nope. I would rather go this way. Fake it. 360 spin around under the leg. Go with the left hand. Kiss the rim on the way down type of deal. It's like magic what he's doing around the rim. And he was more like that at the beginning of the season, which is why I'm going to take probably Curtis Jones. Because if you go 0-7 in that stretch, actually, I wonder if that helps or hurts the team. Because it's like they're 0-7 without Momcilovic, 15-1 with him. I digress. He carried us through that stretch. Keyshawn was more of a flashy early season, but he still maintained his validity on this team. And his attacking is what I do think drives this team, right? It's that kick, that drive kick, opening up the passing lanes with Momcilovic out there in the perimeter. The way this offense works, it needs Keyshawn Gilbert in there. So you can't ignore that one. Now, as I said, I'm probably going to go Curtis Jones. I think Keyshawn Gilbert is right there. And here's my reasoning for why I don't think Tamin Lipsey can win this award that I just made up today. The most important Cyclone award, I don't think Tamin Lipsey can win. And this is not a shot at Tamin Lipsey at all. Please, Tamin, if you see this, just know I love you, buddy. Bottom of my heart. I don't think he can win it just because it's not really what we're measuring. We're not measuring Tamin plays here. Okay. Tamin, if you were to win heartbeat or have an award for heartbeat and soul of a team, that would be Tamin. I wouldn't even, it'd be first ballot unanimous. I can't think of like how clear that would be. Okay. It's like, when you get like a new car or something and the back window's crystal clear, you're looking through the rear view mirror thinking you're looking into a video game monitor or something. It's so clear. And then it goes like it's dusty one day or it rains and it's just dirty for the rest of eternity. It's kind of like that. It'd be so clear that I feel like I'm looking at video game numbers and how much Tamin Lipsey would run away with that heartbeat and soul type of award for Iowa State. I just don't think that the most important Cyclone is measuring that. Okay, and is that fair? Probably not. I apologize, Tamin. This team couldn't operate without you, which then therefore is directly how important you are. But just looking at the record, consistency, I don't. It's so hard to pick because every one of those guys that I mentioned kind of at the beginning has an extremely valid case to win that most important Cyclone. And it's like by a hair that I say Tamin Lipsey, it's not what we're measuring, but it is what we're measuring. So I'm going to say that it's by a hair that we're not. And I'm going to say Keyshawn wasn't as the same later in the season without Momcilovic. I'm saying like all of those measurements, those arguments are by a hair. Excuse me. Realistically, every one of those dudes deserves the most important Cyclone, because this team's unstoppable. That's Actually, I shouldn't say because that's what makes this team unstoppable. This team has so much potential. Okay, and we'll probably talk about that more as we go through. And tomorrow we'll break down the Cincinnati game, and I'm sure you'll hear me talk about it then. But this team really, really solid. And honestly, this was a fun segment. This was kind of like a look at how good the team is, and that's not even including like Deshaun Jackson or Nate Heisey and Brandon Chatfield off the bench, or Demarion Watson, who would be a crazy pick for MIC, but certainly has made some big differences in games. Okay. All right, let's pivot away from basketball. We got to talk football. Big news, big things happening in the football world. We'll talk about that coming up right after this. Okay. Welcome in to Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm not sure why my brain turned off for a second. I apologize. We're talking football. Okay, big news in the football world on a couple different fronts. So I kind of lumped this all together because I haven't really got a lot of further clarification, further news on one front of things, and then the other. I just think they pair well together because actually one kind of leads into the other. We'll talk about the bigger news first. Tyler Roll is on his way out of Ames and is headed into Detroit. Okay. If you're not familiar, Tyler Roll came in, was kind of that assistant coach for Iowa State this year. He spent 11 years at North Dakota State, was the OC for the last 5. It's interesting. I will say he was a running backs coach more than like I would say an assistant coach. The way I've seen it presented, he's going to make a bigger difference now missing from the running backs room. He's headed to the Detroit Lions. Either way, that's the end of the story here. Is that he is leaving for the Lions. Now, what does this mean for Iowa State? Obviously, you're looking at like a Kyle Kempt departure for Drake, and now obviously this one to Detroit. We talked about Noah Pauly sticking around. That's good news, obviously, and then even bigger than that, Matt Campbell sticking around, not taking that Bears job, big deal as well. But this I'm sure will have ramifications in the running back department. River Peppers, who has enrolled in classes at Iowa State, was linked to Coach Tyler Roll. I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say just Tyler. Apologize. And so there will be ramifications of this down the road. We obviously saw Carson Hansen and the jump he made this year, Abu Sama, and the role he played, and then Jackson as well. So the way he went about that whole running back side of things, it's going to make a difference whether he's here or not. Now, I will say Iowa State lost the OC Nate Scheelhaus a few years back, and we were able to bounce back from that. So that's kind of where I'm going about this, is that we'll be fine. We'll certainly be okay. And I'll be interested to see who Iowa State brings in. I'm more interested to see who we bring in than what we're effectively losing at this point. Just because I think there's potential here, as if you're going to fill kind of that assistant coach vibe role, whatever. It depends on the role that that this coach, I shouldn't say that this coach would fill. There's potential. Okay. Now, I just had to mention that. That's news. There's not a whole lot here. I haven't heard any names thrown out that would be replacements. But he only was here 1 year. That's why it's kind of like I'm not trying to dox the guy because he's obviously good enough that he's coaching in the NFL. He's going straight to Detroit after 11 years at North Dakota, or NDSU. But made a big impact. Yes. We wish you luck, but not a huge tie. Big get when he came in, but it's like in and out. I don't know. Just that's how I feel about it. The bigger news, in my opinion, and maybe that's just because I started covering the Cyclones this year, and so I have a closer bond with these guys. I don't know. Iowa State sending 5 players to the NFL Combine in 2025 this year. It'll be held February 27th. I'm trying to think, actually. This thought just popped in my head. Like, should I go? I'm pretty sure tickets are free, but I've just never been able to find out if it's like possible for me to get over there. But that'd be really, really cool. That being said, the 5 dudes are Jaden Higgins, Jalen Knoll, Darian Porter, Jalen Travis, and Malik Verdon. Obviously, we've talked about Malik's brother, coming up to Iowa State. We don't need to talk too much about these guys. You know by now how good they were for this team. Higgins and Knoll, especially the noise they made at the Senior Bowl, was simply, I almost want to put second to none. I've heard, maybe it's because my Twitter's like tailored towards Iowa State, but I've heard so much noise about Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll in comparison to any other Senior Bowl athlete. Not comparison to the draft. Obviously, there's really like quarterback talk and all of that kind of thing. You're not going to beat that out, but a lot of people like, hey, Higgins, we should maybe revisit the film on this guy. 6'4", moves real nimble. Or Jalen Knoll, you want a dude who's going to work real hard, special teams dog. Maybe we look at this guy from Iowa State. And I think that that's a perfect, it's perfect depiction of Jalen Knoll. But the way that this is kind of 5 guys going to Indianapolis, I don't feel like that's super common. Iowa State obviously getting more prevalence in the NFL. And this is not locked on. I don't know if it's locked on Hawkeyes. And I don't love saying this, but I will say it because it is how I feel. The Cooper DeJean doing what he did in the Super Bowl was really cool for the state of Iowa. As he's from Iowa, okay, not the University of Iowa. He's from the state of Iowa, which is really cool to see him succeed in his rookie year that way on the biggest stage. That was really, really cool to see. Now we can stop talking about Iowa, guys. My point is, with that point, and just throw that in there randomly. My point is, with that, dudes from Iowa can still ball. Okay, so Iowa State in Iowa gonna help with, that's a good point. If you're from Iowa, if you've been in Iowa, you can ball. That's where I'm trying to go with that. That point didn't make a whole lot of sense. I'm sorry, coming out of my mouth. But my point is, look at the dudes that are already in the NFL. Obviously, you're going to look towards like Lazard, okay, Montgomery. There's a few dudes, Purdy, obviously. Few dudes that are just head turners, but it's no Alabama, right? It's no Georgia. It's just lowly Iowa State. They got a few guys that come out Breece Hall, a couple guys just randomly come out and they perform well. And then they got a couple that are NFL caliber, maybe just not the right situation, right time. It's just all Iowa State. We haven't even had a 10-win season yet. Wrong. We did this year. And now we're sending 5 to the draft, which I'm sure Alabama's sending 89. Okay, I get it. But this is a step in the right direction. It's just exciting. This isn't like the biggest news piece. That's why we didn't lead off with it today. Because technically speaking, these guys aren't even Cyclones anymore, which is sad to say. They're on their way to the NFL. So best of luck to them. But it is really neat to see that. And I do think it does impact the way that people view the program. I do think that people, with more players going to the NFL and succeeding, people look back like, where's he from? Oh, he's from Iowa State. Oh, interesting. And then it just trickles, right? It's just little seeds planted all over the country. Oh, David Montgomery, where's he from? Oh, Brock Purdy, where's he from? Which everybody knows because of his story, but you know what I mean. And then it starts to influence recruiting, right? It starts to influence mentality around how does this program operate. I just think it's a great step in the right direction. Now, I do know they are technically not on the team anymore, and that's something we'll have to break down. This upcoming team will be doing that as spring ball starts to pick up. But just thought that was a neat thing we should throw in there. Did think it was important. So I talked about it. Appreciate you guys for making it to this point. Tomorrow we'll be breaking down both of the games this weekend, men and women. And can't wait to see you then. Until next time, Cyclone fans. Sayonara.